Tulsi Gabbard made bombshell news by deciding to leave the Democratic Party. And if other Democrats are smart, they will also do the same. So many of you may have heard, but Tulsi Gabbard, the former Hawaii Congresswoman and the former 2020 presidential candidate, recently made a huge announcement that made a lot of people in the media go crazy. And that announcement is very simple. She is leaving her native Democratic Party for reasons that I shall allow her to express in her own words. Tulsi said the following to give a reason as to why she's leaving. She said that, quote, the Democratic Party is under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness. And then she going on to say that the Democratic Party stokes anti-white racism. It is hostile to people of faith and spirituality, and that Democrats, and I quote, demonize the police, but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans. And above all, she says, Democrats are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. I am calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction of the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me. First of all, what a powerful polemic. You know, some of the best works throughout history have been fiery works that capture the essence of truth but deliver it in a way that is jarring. This is jarring. For former Democratic Congresswoman to be making this kind of admission and to do it so brazenly is quite jarring. Now, anyone who's a political observer would have seen this coming. Tulsi has not been a darling of the establishment or those who are in control of the Democratic Party. She never has been. I remember when she ran for president in 2020, they were intentionally blacklisting her. She was the black sheep of the entire fray. And so this is fascinating that she would do this, but it's not surprising. But I think Tulsi's analysis fails in that it limits itself. The power elite are most certainly a problem, and they are perhaps one of the greatest threats to natural liberty that rest in the ethos of the American experiment. And when I say the power elite, I mean people like the World Economic Forum, the Atlantic Council, the internationalists that seek to drive America into so many different conflicts that don't actually respect and adhere to the interest of our national sovereignty. Other people, institutions within our country who seek to direct culture into a certain direction, particularly a subversive direction, by and through wokeness. The power elite have many different faces, and they're a serious problem. But there's a bigger problem, and I think that this is the primary reason why Democrats ought to consider joining Tulsi and walking away from the Democratic Party. Shameless plug for the wonderful hashtag walkaway organization in the Great Britain struggle. We have to view the Democratic Party and every other political entity on the basis of Americanism. And this is what I think a lot of people don't do. Being an American, my friends, is not merely a matter of citizenship. People think that if you have been certified by ICE and you've been granted papers, you are then henceforth an American. That's not the case. Being an American has always been and will always be a matter of principles, not a matter of citizenship. I suppose in a very technical sense, being an American citizen involves naturalization or being born in America or whatever, but being a real American involves being committed to the principles upon which the idea of America sits. And these principles are unambiguous. These principles are forcefully and wonderfully echoed throughout America's founding documents, throughout the Declaration of Independence documents, such as the pamphlets like The Common Sense from Thomas Paine and other works written by great American thinkers, to the post-Jefferson documents, such as the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution in 1787. And the ethos of Americanism is very simple. The ethos of Americanism is this idea that the individual has moral authority, and it is the duty of government to respect the moral qualities that all individuals share in common by virtue of their humanity, also called rights. And every single law must be constituted from that fact. And not only that, but the individual's moral authority is not simply here because someone arbitrarily decided to put it there. No, it is a fact of nature. And therefore, to understand good government, you must also understand the nature of the universe. You must also have an appreciation for objective truth, for intellectual inquiry. These are the principles that constitute Americanism. Now, Americanism is the highest principle in this country. And political parties are oftentimes mistaken to be the highest principles themselves, or to be these all-encompassing forces that shroud out principle. If you talk to most political operatives, a lot of them do not care necessarily about actually understanding Americanism and defending it for what it is. A lot of them care about promoting and supporting the platform of their party, or promoting and supporting the platform of their party by and through their chosen candidate. Philosophical conversation is put to the wayside for mere political expediency. Political parties have had this chilling effect on the American mind to take it away from higher ideas and put it squarely onto the lower stuff of politics. But that doesn't change the fact that Americanism is the highest principle. And so, if Americanism is the highest principle, and it's the basis for American political structure, which it is, and it is therefore the context in which political parties operate in, we have to ask ourselves, do those parties conform to the idea of Americanism? The problem with the Democratic Party is that it is fundamentally against the principles of America writ large, making it hostile to the ideas of Americanism that I just talked about. I'll explain what I mean in a second. But in order to get to the Democratic Party, I have to also address the general critique, which is this. There has been a healthy history of skepticism in the American intellectual tradition towards the two-party system. Almost all of our founders, despite the fact that almost all of them fell into the two-party system, condemned the idea of parties and what they could do to our politics. In fact, I will read some of those quotes for you right now. For example, George Washington said that political parties serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of a party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community, and according to the alternate triumphs of different parties, to make public administration the mirror of ill-concerted and incongruous projects of faction, rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans digested by common councils and modified by mutual interests. So for Washington, political parties put political decision-making in the hands of a few and don't actually consider the interest of Americans or the public. This is part of what Gabbard is talking about when she talks about the power elite, but it goes bigger than this. John Adams, he said that there is nothing which I dread so much as a division of the republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader and concerning measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil of our Constitution. Jefferson said that I never submitted the whole system of my opinions to the creed of any party of men, whether in religion, in philosophy, in politics, or anything else, where I was capable of thinking for myself. Such as an addiction is the last degradation of a free and moral agent. I can go on and on and on. But the sentiments talked about by Washington, Adams, and Jefferson were generally felt by the American founders, even though many of them ended up becoming the very thing they dreaded. Many of them ended up becoming a part of political parties and bitterly fighting on the basis. But this skepticism is reasonable for both parties, Republican and Democrat. And so if we already understand that parties themselves are tools, utilities that are oftentimes treated as places of worship, shrines, the sort of certification table for tribes, then we can understand that most people view parties, political parties, in a way that is not proper. They view them in a way that is actually a category mistake. Political parties are not tribes. Political parties are meant to be tools to further the principles of Americanism. But alas, many political parties, especially the Democrats, deviate from that idea. So we have to ask ourselves, now that we've said that Americanism is the highest principle for consideration in our nation, we have to ask ourselves, does the Democratic Party in its various philosophies and positions uphold the principle of Americanism? If we've already established that political parties themselves have trouble doing this by their very nature, then at the very least, we should hope to use these tools as best as possible to further the idea of Americanism. As a constitutional conservative, it is my duty to ensure that the Constitution of the United States of America is preserved and it is postulated throughout the land and understood by everyone and cherished, but not just the Constitution, but the principles inherent to it. So the question is, do the Democratic Party's viewpoints actually do this? Well, for many reasons, no. And I'll give you several reasons. Number one, the Democratic Party supports a false idea of rights. There are two ideas of rights in the sort of the tradition of political theory: positive rights and negative rights. Positive rights basically say that rights are things that are granted to you by a certain agency, such as voting or such as welfare and things or whatever. And then negative rights says that rights are actually things that belong to you by virtue of your humanity, that no one can take away from you because they are so deeply ingrained into who you are. Democrats genuinely and clearly believe that rights are actually permitted and granted to you. This is why they champion certain programs. This is why they have been pushing quote-unquote voter rights. This is why they push certain social programs, because they genuinely believe that the individual derives their worth, derives their ability, their skill, their resilience from external forces, as opposed to already having that within them. That is directly anti-American. Let's do another one. The Democrats generally do not respect the will of the individual. The majority of Democratic voters, when they were polled, wanted to put people who did not want to take the vaccine, who special facilities, isolated away from society. These were voters who were polled as to if they liked Biden. If they liked Biden, they tended to have that kind of viewpoint. And not only that, but several Democratic governors and Democratic politicians were the ones who shut down their economies and pushed for certain policies that we understand caused a whole lot of trouble. And of course, most infamously, it was Joe Biden who attempted to arbitrarily enforce by executive fiat a vaccine mandate onto the entire country and onto private enterprise. This is not a party that respects the will of the individual. The party wanted this and their agents executed it. Let's do another one. They don't respect economic freedom. The fact that you have this infrastructure bill, and you have several spending mechanisms, you have universal health care, all of these things being proposed, all of which go against the well-oiled machine of the free market and attempt to use the government to dictate how these spontaneous processes of free enterprise and exchange play out. That shows not only a lack of respect for economic freedom, but that also shows a lack of understanding of how economics works. Government cannot demand supply. It cannot demand certain things and they come into existence. There has to already be an interest, a need for that thing. But the kind of Keynesianism that is on display in the Democratic Party does not respect that. Another one. The Democratic Party has been a political vehicle for culturally subversive ideas to make their way into America. All these ideas which are virulently anti-American. So one example here would be critical race theory. So we've heard a lot about this idea over the past year or so. I've done extensive work on it on this channel and elsewhere. And we have several instances, such as one of the first things that Joe Biden's education department did when he came into office, which was attempt to make a grant to send it out to public institutions if they would teach things like Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist and other critical race theory influenced texts. Not only that, but there was also a community grant program that seeks to give money to educational institutions for certain purposes. And that community grant program actually also attempts to fund in American education teachings about restorative justice, which is another plank of the idea that America is an inherently systemically racist country and we have to take institutional methods to deconstruct that. Again, these ideas are anti-American because these ideas don't actually embrace the spirit of intellectual inquiry that Americanism does. They don't acknowledge the existence, per se, of objective truth, because to accept the tenets of critical race theory, you must also accept the tenet of lived experience, and to do that is to say that objective truth does not exist, my truth exists. These are all things that are attempting to shoot at the foundation of what the political structures in America are built upon, and this party has been a vehicle for doing so. Not only that, but we have seen with the children's situation, the transgender children's situation, that a lot of Democratic politicians and Democratic leaders had a certain view of childhood. The Biden Justice Department said very clearly that children should be able to decide for themselves who and what they are in their defense of transgender child transitioning services. This idea of children, these ideas about society and cultural issues, these ideas about economics, these ideas about what rights are, all of these different ideas which use the vehicle of the Democratic Party to go ahead and achieve their political fruition, every single one of these ideas is rotten to the core, it's anti-American to the core, because it rejects America's fundamental premises, and it therefore has no business in the American political structure. As I said, not everybody can be an American. To be an American, you have to accept certain ideals. And if you don't accept those ideals, you are not philosophically an American. You may be an American citizen. You may be someone who says you enjoy living in the country, but if you don't embrace what America is all about, if you don't embrace the idea of individual liberty, of natural rights, natural law, objective truth, man being a creature of reason and thus being able to direct his social relations through reason, man being a morally a moral agent and a morally important individual in the organization of society, if you don't embrace these things, you don't embrace America. And there is plenty of evidence right here that the Democratic Party has not done that. This is not to say that Republicans are perfect and awesome. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I have serious problems with both parties. But I know for certain, I know for sure that what the Democratic Party has been spewing for decades upon decades upon decades is nothing more than anti-American bile which threaten the foundations of this country. I didn't even mention the fact that Democrats right now are enabling FBI tyrant raids of MAGA people and of the former president. I didn't even mention the speech Biden made. I haven't even mentioned the sanctions that have been placed on Russia that have crippled America and have made high inflation a norm of our existence. I haven't even mentioned all of the different policies championed by the Democratic Party that are still hurting us. But the point is simple. If anyone, politician or party, does not adhere to the ideas of America, to Americanism as the highest principle, then that person is anti-American, and that person, therefore, has no business operating in the American political system. They are defying its fundamental tenets. They are attacking it at its very core, and therefore, they have no way of preserving it or upholding it, as every politician who serves in Congress or in a government swears to do when they go in. If you support these policies, you are violating your oath of office, and yet so many leaders do so. Because as the founders warned, they don't care about principle, they care about the passions of faction and the dictates of faction. Do not let our country die and be sacrificed for the dictates of faction. Allow our country to continue to exist on the solid foundation that it has existed for over 270 years, and help us preserve that foundation, because right now it has a lot of enemies. Tulsi Gabbard's action took courage, and it is an action that I am most certainly sure will act as a guiding light for more dissident minds who recognize the problem of the Democratic Party. This is not about being left or right, whether you are left or whether you are right. If you believe in America and you consider yourself to be a philosophical American, then this party is not for you. All right, my friends, I love you guys so much. If you love me, please be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this video, comment on this video. My friends, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.